As we discussed at the top of the hour, Ukraine made the decision to attack an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea, with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arguing that it was a justified strike since Iran is essentially, in his words, providing Shahed drones to Russia for their war against Ukraine. Now, I believe that was a dumb move, to say the least, and here to discuss whether or not I'm correct, but more importantly, how this is all going to likely play out, is Trita Parsi, who is the executive VP of the Quincy Institute. Trita, I'm so grateful that you're here today because
thanks so much for having me.
It's a difficult story to cover because understandably, a lot of people, especially in our audience, are very sympathetic to Ukraine following Russia's invasion. However, I believe that if you genuinely care about the people of Ukraine, you would kind of game this out and realize it was a dumb move. But I'm just curious what your overall thoughts are, and then I'll ask you some more specific questions.
Sure. So first of all, I think we can all recognize that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was a violation of international law and an illegal move. That, however, does not mean that everything Ukraine does afterwards is justified or legitimate, or vice versa. In other conflicts. So I think we have to deal with all of them in their right context. And what is happening here potentially, I'm not, you may have seen my tweet. I said this appears to be more than just an effort to inflict a cost on the Iranians for supporting Russia through these drones. And I think it's also important to understand, if that becomes the new rule, that if one country is supporting another country by weapons, they can be attacked, then the United States is going to be attacked by a lot of different countries, mindful of the fact that we're providing so many weapons. Now, one can definitely say that the Iranians are in support of Russia and that is a wrong move from them, questionable, et cetera, et cetera. That's all fine. But for that to be a justification for attack is a different story. But now the Ukrainians have done this, and they've done it very openly, bragging about it. And the Iranians have threatened to respond in kind. And there's been a lot of speculation that this is a way for them to show their drone capabilities and use that in order to get Trump to become more helpful towards them, et cetera. I suspect that there may be something bigger going on here, because from the very outset of this conflict, understandably from Ukraine's perspective, there's been an effort to actually get the United States into the war with Russia directly. If you're Ukraine, you're a much smaller country, you're invaded by a nuclear weapon state. Yes, you will be welcoming support and weapons, but if you really could get your way, you would actually get the United States into the war and fight Russia, because that's going to have a much better chance of succeeding for your end. But from the US's perspective, even the Biden administration that was so supportive of Ukraine put forward some very clear red lines. No troops on the ground, no to this proposal of a no-fly zone, which would have forced the US to shoot down Russian planes. That would be a direct confrontation, providing F-16s, other things that could get this to escalate to the point in which the US would be at direct war with Russia. And Trump, of course, criticized him for this. But what I think that Ukraine is maybe trying to do right now is to merge the Iran war with the Ukraine war.
Do you know your brain rot index? No, of course you don't. I didn't either because I didn't know what it was, but turns out you might want to, especially after hearing this. Did you know that the average American checks their phone over 200 times a day? That's about 5 hours of screen time a day on just your phone. Unfortunately, that means your brain is rotting. A little bit, but have no fear. I switched over to Noble Mobile, downloaded their Noble Mobile Life app, and was able to track my own brain rot index. It's 0. No, I'm just kidding. My number was not great, but now that I'm on Noble Mobile, getting way better. It tracks how much you use your phone, how often you pick it up, and even shows you how to save money on your phone bill by using it less. New members can even earn up to $100 cash back for keeping their brain rot index under 100, which means you are very unrot. Okay, so you unlock all that when you join. So download the Noble Mobile Life app today, track your own brain rot index, and learn how you can save money and spend more time doing things that actually bring you joy instead of doom scrolling on social media. Check it out by heading to tyt.com/switch or by downloading the Noble Mobile app. By the way, don't tell Andrew, but if you're on Wi-Fi, you also don't use your data, so you're gonna get money back anyway. tyt.com/switch.
It's not just about showing capabilities or dangling some carrots to Trump. it's to merge the two wars, because if Ukraine becomes a belligerent in the Iran war, then it could also lead to the United States becoming a belligerent in the Russia war. And that would then achieve what the Ukrainians have tried to achieve since 2022, but no president has been willing to go that far. But Trump just happens to be in a very vulnerable position right now because he's stuck. His military attacks against Iran are not working. He doesn't have the patience for the diplomatic solutions. And this would enable a new front to be open, so that it's not just the southern part of Iran, but also the northern part of the country, which could potentially change the course of the war. So I think Trump will be susceptible to this. I think ultimately he will likely reject the proposal, but I think he will be tempted because he's really stuck in the Iran war and is desperately looking for some sort of a magical military solution.
So last week on Friday, earlier that day, Trump had threatened to escalate the war against Iran. And by the end of the day, he backed out, right? People are mocking him. Oh, it's taco. Trump always chickens out. I'm glad that he backed off because it turns out he finally listened to a few members of his administration who might love the war against Iran, but are real about the limitations of the United States, considering the fact that we've been arming Israel, depleting our stockpiles in doing so, arming Ukraine, depleting our stockpiles in doing so. We are very low on missile interceptors, which is precisely the reason why Trump hasn't been bombing Iran over the last few days. And so I'm curious if Volodymyr Zelensky is aware that these are interceptors that take years to make. We don't have the capacity to rush that right now. We are so low that we had to back off the war against Iran. So if Zelensky decides to open this new front, is he genuinely under the impression that he would be provided the defense capabilities necessary to actually protect his own people against Iranian strikes?
I think his calculation may very well be that exactly because he's opening a new front against the Iranians, that will be a big help to the US. And as a result, his ability to make the case for getting those limited interceptors will be stronger. Because part of what happened in this Iran war, that a lot of the resources the US had actually given the Ukrainians, some of it was actually taken back and put into the hands of the Israelis. This already happened back in June 2025 when the Israelis started that war with Iran. So in some ways, there's also this competition amongst these countries that are seeking America's support to be able to make the best possible case of getting it. And if he's opening this new front with the Iranians, changing the geography in the war, the Iranians so far have been the one that have been in control of the geography of the war. They're the ones who have escalated horizontally, and by that really put the US on the defensive. And the US, in some bizarre way, did not calculate that this would be a very likely thing that the Iranians would do. But this would now turn the table on the Iranians by opening this northern front. And precisely because of that, he may calculate that he will be in the best possible position to make the case to the US that they need to get more support.
You know, last week in a Truth Social post following Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's testimony before the Senate Appropriations Committee, Donald Trump shot down what Hegseth had to say about China and Iran assisting, China and Russia assisting Iran in this war that we're wrapped up in at this moment. He said, I talked to Putin and I take him at his word that Russia is not providing weaponry or any help to the Iranians. And it's interesting that on one hand, you have the president of the United States downplaying both China and Russia's role in this war against Iran. And then simultaneously, you see Zelensky trying to ingratiate himself with Trump by carrying out the strike against the Iranian vessel. And so is Trump just kind of playing a game here? Or do you think he genuinely trusts that Putin is not involving himself in this Iran war?
No, I think, and I don't know if I would say that he's playing a game, but if he were to admit that there's a likelihood or even confirmation that the Russians provided intelligence that led to the Iranians striking Jordan and killing American soldiers, then he will be faced with tremendous amount of pressure to retaliate and end up in that type of a confrontation. And incidentally, Zelensky in that interview said that he had clear intelligence that showed that it was the Russians that had provided that. It lies in Zelensky's interest to get the US into that direct confrontation with Iran. To get with Russia, just as much as it lied in Israel's interest to get the US into that confrontation with Iran. So I think the fact that Trump is kind of being careful here is precisely because he doesn't want to trap himself. He doesn't want to corner himself and then be forced to take some sort of action that could be disastrous. But it's also probably because it's not entirely clear at this point whether that was the case. I see only three options. Either they got it from the Russians, got it from the Chinese, or got it from what the Iranians say is the case. And I don't know if we can trust that entirely, but they nevertheless say that it's actually intelligence that is coming from inside of Jordan itself. I would say that the Russian option here is probably the most plausible one.
So what I've been seeing a lot in the media, especially in recent months, is a lot of boastful commentary from analysts about Ukrainian gains and how their drone technology has been so effective. And it's almost as if like, oh, Ukraine's doing so well, they almost like don't even need the United States. Like that's kind of implied in some of the reporting, which, to be completely forthcoming with the audience, I personally don't believe. I know that they've carried out some strikes against Russia in their own territory. But let's say the US doesn't have the weapons that they can provide Ukraine to fight off both Russia and Iran, if it really does expand to a war involving Iran. Does Ukraine have its own, weapons development? Because I know that they've been working on that to fight off Iran and Russia at the same time.
No, I very much doubt that they have that at the end of the day. But also, Iran has limitations. It's been focusing on retaliations against GCC states in Jordan. He has not actually escalated towards Israel this time around. Imagine if all of these wars merge together and you have an all-out war in which the Iranians have to fight the US, all of these GCC states, Jordan, Israel, and Ukraine at the same time, or that the US will be involved in all of these different affairs. It would be an absolute disaster for all of them, in my view, at the end of the day. None of them have the resources in which they could say that all of this is going to end up working out fine. The Ukrainians have, because of the fact that they've been at war now for more than 4 years, they have been able to develop a lot of new technology, methodologies, etc. On the drone side in particular, they're probably cutting edge at this point. They're getting a tremendous amount of resources to be able to develop this. I mean, there is a cynical perspective here, is that Ukraine essentially has become this testing ground for a lot of different weapons, and that European and American companies are testing their new weaponry in Ukraine. And as a result, the Ukrainians have a lot of experience with all of this. But is it enough to be able to take on this? I think it's a very foolish step, because at the end of the day, yes, the Russians have not managed to defeat Ukraine. And it's a major victory for the Ukrainians. But at the end of the day, expanding the war only makes sense if you are confident that the resources the Iranians bring into the war will be far outmatched by the fact that the US would enter the war against Russia. That's how it would make sense for them. But that is a huge gamble.
It really is. It really is a huge gamble. And you're gambling, Zelensky in this case is gambling with the lives of, Ukrainian civilians who have been through a lot over the last, 4.5 years. Well, I know you have to go. Thank you so much for being generous with your time, Trita. Thanks so much for having me.
Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.